Buongiorno. Good morning. I have already announced this in a previous recording called I Needed to Prioritize. Wow, I have found this amazing mixture. I'm gonna read soon, don't worry. I just wish to give you something before I start. Wow, this is really a big one for me to continue at least for 2026 with this. An amazing mixture. It's like chai tea. Like chai, it's supposed to mean, it's like spiced tea from India. Only I started adding Svertia powder, which is bitter, and I really love it. It just gives it this creamy kind of bitter, and then with the black tea you can also add, I added nutmeg and black cardamom and cinnamon. I like it. Or at least, I said I like coffee and then I had to let go of this, so I'm gonna keep the window open. Okay, I really hit this point where I said I'm never gonna record this again. And maybe it would have been better. But let's see it. I just believe this to be somewhat of importance. Chapter 8. Yeah. The Mermaid's Lagoon. If you shut your eyes and are a lucky one, you may see at times a shapeless pool of lovely pale colors, suspended in the darkness. Then if you squeeze your eyes tighter, the pool begins to take shape, and the colors become so vivid that with another squeeze they must go on fire. But just before they go on fire, you see the lagoon. This is the nearest you ever get to it on the mainland. Okay, I have to do that one again. This is the nearest you ever get to it on the mainland. Just one heavenly moment. If there could be two moments, you might see the surf and hear the mermaids singing. The children often spent long summer days on this lagoon, swimming or floating most of the time, playing the mermaid games in the water and so forth. You must not think from this that the mermaids were on friendly terms with them. On the contrary, it was among Wendy's lasting regrets that all the time she was on the island, she never had a civil word from one of them. When she stole softly to the edge of the lagoon, she might see them by the shore. It says score. But especially on Maruna's Rock. How can you ruin a good reading? Don't practice it! Yeah, it's still Zen, right? I'm reading it, you get my voice, what more do you want? What more do you want? This is hard work, my friend. Gotta appreciate all the people that read books to you just because you're too lazy to read it yourself. If you can still listen to this, then you're really you probably then know how to dissociate. So you're not really fazed what people give you. Otherwise, you would have turned this off already. Yeah, I can guarantee you this one. So if you know how to dissociate, then you also know how to let go. And that means, in a sense, you have no reason to listen to me doing this. You could be doing this yourself. You should be creative. You should be sharing your mind. Because if you know how to access dissociative states just like this, then you should be creative. I'm gonna continue reading this anyway, just because I like doing this. I like hearing my own voice, but I've also grown incredibly by using my voice a lot. I mean, it's what we have, right? I mean, we can question why do we speak? What are all these words? Well, they are there, and we use them to express how we feel if we are honest. Yeah, let's just do the whole sentence again. When she stole softly to the edge of the lagoon, she might see them by the score. That's what it says in the book. Especially on Maruna's Rock. Where they loved to bask, combing out their hair in a lazy way that quite irritated her. Or she might even swim, on tiptoe as it were, to within a yard of them. But then they saw her and dived, probably splashing her with their tails, not by accident, but intentionally. They treated all the boys in the same way, except of course Peter, who chatted with them on Maruna's Rock by the hour and sat on their tails when they got cheeky. He gave Wendy one of their coons. The most haunting time at which to see them is at the turn of the moon, when they utter strange wailing cries, but the lagoon is dangerous for mortals then. And until the evening of which we have now to tell, Wendy had never seen the lagoon by moonlight, less from fear. For of course Peter would have accompanied her. Then because she had strict rules about everyone being in bed by 7. She was often at the lagoon, however, on sunny days after rain, when the mermaids come up in extraordinary numbers to play with their bubbles. The bubbles of many colors made in rainbow water they treat as balls, hitting them gaily from one to another with their tails, and trying to keep them in the rainbow till they burst. The goals are at each end of the rainbow, and the keepers only are allowed to use their heads. Sometimes hundreds of mermaids will be playing in the lagoon at a time, and it is quite a pretty sight. But the moment the children tried to join in, they had to play by themselves, for the mermaids immediately disappeared. Nevertheless, we have proof that they secretly watched the interlopers. Is he an AI? Yeah, possibly. I just fed all my podcast into an AI and then made it read this book, you know. That's what I've been doing. And it even learned how to, throw in the occasional comment just to get you to read the book yourself, because it's a much better exercise for you. Wow, I'm super wary of reading this to you. This is incredible. I don't want to do this. But at the same time, I kind of enjoy it. It's just so much emptiness. I could be speaking so many, important things to you. But instead, I'm reading you something which is what you could do yourself. But I have been grateful at times that I have pushed through such works. I just have to figure out how to hold this. How to hold this. But yeah, I think 2026 is clearly gonna be my last thing for doing stuff like this. Okay. Nevertheless, we have proof that they secretly watched the interlopers and were not above taking an idea from them. For John introduced a new way of hitting the bubble with the head instead of the hand, and the mermaid goalkeepers adopted it. This is the one mark that John has left on the Neverland. It must also have been rather pretty to see the children resting on a rock for half an hour after their midday meal. Wendy insisted on their doing this, and it had to be a real rest, even though the meal was make-believe. So they lay there in the sun, and their bodies glistened in it, while she sat beside them and looked important. It was one such day, and they were all on Maruna's rock. The rock was not much larger than their great bed, but of course they all knew how not to take up much room, and they were dozing, or at least lying with their eyes shut, and pinching occasionally when they thought Wendy was not looking. She was very busy stitching. While she stitched, a change came to the lagoon. Little shivers ran over it, and the sun went away and shadows stole across the water, turning it cold. Wendy could no longer see to thread her needle, and when she looked up, the lagoon that had always hitherto been such a laughing place seemed formidable and unfriendly. Just a side remark, I'm gonna try to keep these comments at bay, because I actually believe that I can do this without remorse. Right, just to spend time being creative. That is what I wish to do. You got through the hard part, you know. I'm just getting used to doing this again. I haven't recorded myself in quite a while. It was not, she knew, that night had come, but something as dark as night had come. No worse than that. It had not come, but it had sent that shiver through the sea to say that it was coming. What was it? There crowded upon her all the stories she had been told of Maruna's Rock, so called because evil captains put sailors on it and leave them there to drown. They drown when the tide rises, for then it is submerged. Of course, she should have roused the children at once, not merely because of the unknown that was stalking toward them, but because it was no longer good for them to sleep on a rock grown chilly. But she was a young mother, and she did not know this. She thought you simply must stick to your rule about half an hour after the midday meal. So, though fear was upon her, and she longed to hear male voices, she would not waken them. Even when she heard the sound of muffled oars, though her heart was in her mouth, she did not waken them. She stood over them to let them have their sleep out. Was it not brave of Wendy? Yeah, I get that about the male voices. That's why I always listen to male audiobook narrators, because it often helped me to just get through the day. You may not know this, why you chose me to read this to you, but the truth is that you're probably craving a man in your life, right? And that means you gotta become a man yourself. If you're a woman, then look for one. You know, start changing, do your cleansing, do your workouts, go into nature. The voice you are listening to is spending a lot of time hiking barefoot in nature. You know, the voice you are listening to belongs to a man that stopped eating sugar, that started to be mostly ketogenic, you know, that eats salad with freshly grated horseradish in it. So, figure yourself out, man or woman, right? Or man or woman of the future. You gotta do your own growing. You gotta choose the experiences you wish to have. And then have the courage, you know, to get through with it. Have I said this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Well, I have at times, and then it became a drag. And then I planned ahead, And then I had a break from YouTube for a very long time. Well, this is only also partly going into my podcast, of course. But, now I'm back. At least for some time. So, It was well for those boys then that there was one among them who could sniff danger even in his sleep. Peter sprang erect, as wide awake at once as a dog, and with one warning cry he roused the others. He stood motionless, one hand to his ear. "Pirates!" he cried. The others came closer to him. A strange smile was playing about his face, and Wendy saw it and shuddered. While that smile was on his face, no one dared address him. All they could do was to stand ready to obey. The order came sharp and incisive. "Dive!" There was a gleam of lags, and instantly the lagoon seemed deserted. Maruna's rock stood alone in the forbidding waters, as if it were itself maroon. The boat drew nearer. It was the pirate dinghy, with 3 figures in her, Smee and Starkey, and the third a captive no other than Tiger Lily. Her hands and ankles were tied, and she knew what was to be her fate. She was to be left on the rock to perish, an end to one of her race more terrible than death by fire or torture. For is it not written in the book of the tribe that there is no path through water to the happy hunting ground? Yet her face was impassive. She was the daughter of a chief. She must die as a chief's daughter. It is enough. They had caught her boarding the pirate ship with a knife in her mouth. No watch was kept on the ship, it being Hook's boat that the wind of his name guarded the ship for a mile around. Now her fate would help to guard it also. One more whale would go the round in that wind by night. In the gloom that they brought with them, the 2 pirates did not see the rock till they crashed into it. "Luff, you lubber!" cried an Irish voice that was Smee's. "Here's the rock." I cannot do Irish, by the way. Oh, wait. "Luff, you lubber!" Nah, forget it. I'm just gonna read it my own way. Because I don't intend to remember voices, like I said. I'm just reading this. "Luff, you lubber!" cried the Irish voice that was Smee's. "Here's the rock. Now then, what we have to do is to hoist the redskin onto it and leave her there to drown." It was the work of one brutal moment to land the beautiful girl on the rock. She was too proud to offer a vain resistance. Quite near the rock, but out of sight, 2 heads were bobbing up and down. Peter's and Wendy's. Wendy was crying, for it was the first tragedy she had seen. Peter had seen many tragedies, but he had forgotten them all. He was less sorry than Wendy for Tiger Lily. It was 2 against 1 that angered him, and he meant to save her. An easy way would have been to wait until the pirates had gone, but he was never one to choose the easy way. There was almost nothing he could do, and he now imitated the voice of Hook. "Ahoy there, you lubbers!" he called. It was a marvelous imitation. "The captain!" said the pirates, staring at each other in surprise. He must be swimming out to us," Starkey said when they had looked for him in vain. "We are putting the redskin on the rocks," Smee called out. "Set her free," came the astonishing answer. "Free?" "Yes, but cut her bonds and let her go." "But, Captain—" "At once, d'ye hear?" cried Peter, "or I'll plunge my hook in you." "This is queer," Smee gasped. "Better do what the captain orders," said Starkey nervously. "Aye, aye," Smee said, and he cut Tiger Lily's cords. At once, like an eel, she slid between Starkey's legs into the water. Of course, Wendy was very elated over Peter's cleverness. But she knew that he would be elated and also uh, but she knew that he would be elated also and very likely crow and thus betray himself. So at once her hand went out to cover his mouth. You know the crow? I think that's the crow. You can actually do this. It's very good to cleanse your vocal cords of anything, like unsaid truths. I actually have to get used to it. When I started, I probably said this already, 2 weeks I couldn't, make it 2 months. It was a real strain. Yeah. But his, no. Maybe she just wanted to touch his hand. But she knew that he would be elated also and very likely crow and thus betray himself. So at once her hand went out to cover his mouth. But it was stayed even in the act. For "Boat ahoy!" rang over the lagoon in Hook's voice, and this time it was not Peter who had spoken. Peter may have been about to crow, but his face puckered in a whistle of surprise instead. "Boat ahoy!" again came the cry. Now Wendy understood. The real Hook was also in the water. He was swimming to the boat, and as his men showed a light to guide him, he had soon reached them in the light of the lantern. When he saw his Hook... wait. Wow, it's getting confusing now. In the light of the lantern, ladies... Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very bad at doing this. That's why nobody could ever get me to rehearse this. In the light of the lantern, Wendy saw his Hook grip the boat's side. She saw his evil, swarthy face as he rose dripping from the water and quaking. That's one thing I really don't get. How people can jump into water in wet clothes and not mind. I hate wet clothes. It's I always make sure that I have my rain poncho about me when I go for a hike. Because there's nothing I despise more. I'd rather go hiking naked than in wet clothes. I don't know what this is. Maybe it's just so damn... So I'm wondering, how can you live in the forest without ever having wet clothes? Or what clothes would you have to wear? Because maybe it's the fabric that makes it so... You know what I'm saying, right? I mean, my mind is just jumping at anything just to give you a bit of sense of there are other things to do in your life than listen to me or others read to you. First of all, it's reading yourself. That's basically the reason I record this, to tell you this. But it's also, you can do so many things. Maybe you don't live close to nature now, but why can't you plan it so in 10 years you'll be living closer to nature? You'll be harvesting your own berries, my friend. You'll be figuring out your own lagoons, You'll be marveling at, so you can start doing stuff now that may help you to get closer to nature. You can have a home office, switch jobs, get closer to nature, start being creative, start investing into a different kind of income. And from all the experiences you then make, you could well be writing books, start a podcast. You could, crochet hats and sell them. You could make dream catchers and sell them. You could give courses to people how to make their own dream catchers. You could give courses to people how to crochet. And if your life is fulfilled, you don't even have to ask money for it. Of course you have to have a plan, It's just my plan to do this. I think these remarks are quite beneficial to anyone who's looking for something, because if you have to listen to me reading a book to you, then there's clearly something missing in your life. But that is yourself. You have to find this, whatever you look in, look for in the content that you consume or watch or listen to. You gotta find this in yourself. You listen to me, well, I'm a highly creative guy and I speak my mind. That's basically what I do. But I also balance it. So I first slacklined until slacklining fell away, and that was very sad because I loved it so, but then I had to let it go. And now I'm in the process of slowly letting go, all this YouTube stuff. So yeah, get used to it, man. Because I'm not the only one out there. There's more people rising, right? Just to stand up against all this corruption. We're sick of it. This is rebellion, my friend. We're rebelling at all these constances, I'm not like all the other stalks, I may be a stalk of grass, but I am not like all the others. I am an individual, and that brings us back to, Tiger Lily's ideas about the tribe. The tribe consists of individuals that work together for a common cause. Society consists of, trying to make everyone seem the same, but then also separating it into classes so that the chief can feel like, oh yeah, I'm really important. But, in a real tribe, the chief doesn't have to feel really important. He is important, and that's why he's responsible. That's why he doesn't get drunk and slouches off and drives around in a limousine. No, he's there and he's stable. But he also knows that without the tribe, the people in the tribe, he'd be nothing. And that's what inspired me to write Tribes of the Modern World, which is my most recent book that I published. And it's basically a guide for you to work on yourself towards realizing that the tribe already exists. So, you see, I am advertising myself as an author. That's why I have continued. Wow, this is really hard for me. Because I have another book to write now, Portals Through Life, and I have music to make. I'm scattered, I'm all over the place. I just want to do everything at the same time. But I said now I'm going to first finish this. It's really hard. It's not easy to be creative on so many levels. I'm just telling you this. Okay. Dripping, yeah, okay. We started off into the rant into the sidetrack of Christopher's mind when Hook was dripping from the water and quaking. She would have liked to swim away, but Peter would not budge. He was tingling with life and also top-heavy with conceit. Am I not a wonder? Oh, I am a wonder, he whispered to her, and though she thought so also, she was really glad for the sake of his reputation that no one heard him except herself. He sighed to her to listen. He signed to her to listen. The two pirates were very curious to know what had brought their captain to them, but he sat with his head on his hook in a position of profound melancholy. Captain, is all well? They asked timidly, but he answered with a hollow moan. He sighs, said Smee. He sighs again, said Starkey. And yet a third time he sighs, said Smee. What's up, Captain? Then at last he spoke passionately. The game's up, he cried. Those boys have found a mother. Affrighted though she was, Wendy swelled with pride. For being a pretend mother. Yeah, I mean, okay, a mother, yeah, okay, I get that. There's also the mother in a spiritual sense, which is why I encourage you to read or listen to the audiobook until you understand it, and then you can let go of it. From Erich Neumann, Origins and History of Consciousness, or history and origins of consciousness. It's about the mother. It's a lot about also energy and Jomungandr, your Moonganda, Gand, the Viking lore serpent that circles around the earth and bites its own tail. But it also is a lot about these archetypes, especially the mother. I think Erich Neumann was a student of Freud's, but built up on, or Jung maybe something like this. And he built up on this previous thing. And it's a lot about also the idea of heroes and, yeah, if you're stuck on masturbation, check it out to understand that you're being used. He was tingling with life, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's up, Captain? The game's up. Those boys have found a mother. Yeah. Affrighted though she was, Wendy swelled with pride. You know, to smother. You get the term, to smother? There's mother in it. You know, some mothers smother their children. Because they don't want to take care of themselves, which is why they may need extra support from their children, also at a later stage, which is why, have you been nice to your parents recently? Well, I'm still trying, but life's tough. Okay, Wendy swelled with pride. Oh, evil day, cried Starkey. What's a mother? Asked the ignorant Smee. Wendy was so shocked that she exclaimed, he doesn't know! And always after this she felt that if you could have a pet pirate, Smee would be her one. Yeah, obviously. Peter pulled her beneath the water, for Hook had started up, crying, What was that? I heard nothing, said Starkey, raising the lantern over the waters. And as the pirates looked, they saw a strange sight. It was the nest I have told you of, floating on the lagoon, and the Never Bird was sitting on it. Oh me, oh my. Look at the sky, and wonder at the clouds, and see the boy that lives inside, that forgot to be ever so proud. You know, of just being alive, man. Just gotta be a bit cheeky, man. You gotta be a bit cheeky. You have to be a bit cheeky. Peter is the image in your mind for your inner child. But he's also a trickster. You have to live with that. See, said Hook in answer to Smee's question. That is a mother. What a lesson. He's in Zen, my friend. What a lesson. What's a mother? There's one, you know. That's life. You're asking a question, life comes to answer. It's like, bam, do what he does. Be creative, lad. Oh, what do I want to do in my life? You want to be creative, my friend. So let go. Let loose. Show him what you got. See, said Hook in answer to Smee's question. That is a mother. What a lesson. You know, the nest must have fallen into the water, but would the mother desert her eggs? No. There was a break in his voice, as if for a moment he recalled innocent days when, but he brushed away this weakness with his hook. Smee, much impressed, gazed at the bird as the nest was borne past. But the more suspicious Starkey said, If she is a mother, perhaps she is hanging about her to help Peter. Hook winced. Aye, he said, that is the fear that haunts me. He was roused from this dejection by Smee's eager voice. Captain, said Smee, could we not kidnap these boys' mother and make her our mother? It is a princely scheme, cried Hook, and at once it took practical shape in his great brain. We will seize the children. Oh, I had a different voice for it. Please read The Last Unicorn. It's the best book. I had recorded it, but it isn't public domain material yet. Sometime in 2040, if I'm still around, I'll release it. but I could only release until I think 2028 into the future. So, I have to wait another 15 years before I can schedule it, 5 years in advance. It is a Wow, it's just gone. It is a princely scheme, cried Hook, and at once it took practical shape in his brain. We will seize the children and carry them to the boat. The boys we will make walk the plank, and Wendy shall be our mother. Again Wendy forgot herself. Never, she cried and bubbled. What was that? But they could see nothing. They thought it must have been a leaf in the wind. Do you agree, my bullies? Asked Hook. There is my hand on it, they both said. And there is my hook, swear! They all swore. But this time they were on the rock, and suddenly Hook remembered Tiger Lily. Where's the redskin? He demanded abruptly. He had a playful humor at moments, and they thought this was one of his moments. One of the moments. That is all right, Captain, Smee answered complacently. We let her go. Let her go, cried Hook. 'Twas your own orders, the boatswain faltered. You called away the water to us, let her go. You called over the water to us to let her go, said Stalky. Brimstone and gal, thundered Hook. What cozening is there? What cozening is here? His face had gone black with rage, but he saw that they believed their words, and he was startled. Lads, he said, shaking a little, I gave no such order. It is passing queer, Smee said, and they all fidgeted uncomfortably. Hook raised his voice, but there was a quiver in it. Spirit that haunts this dark lagoon tonight, he cried. Dost hear me? Of course Peter should have kept quiet, but of course he did not. He immediately answered in Hook's voice, Odds bobs, hammer and tongs, I hear you. In that supreme moment Hook did not blanch, even at the gills, but Smee and Starkey clung to each other in terror. Who are you, stranger? Speak, Hook demanded. I am James Hook, replied the voice, captain of the Jolly Roger. You are not, Hook cried hoarsely. Brimstone and gal, the voice retorted. Say that again and I'll cast anchor in you. Cast anchor in you. Hook tried a more ingratiating manner. If you are Hook, he said almost humbly, come tell me, who am I? A codfish, replied the voice. Only a codfish. A codfish, Hook echoed blankly, and it was then, but not till then, that his proud spirit broke. He saw his men draw back from him. Have we been captained all this time by a codfish? They muttered. It is lowering to our pride. They were his dogs, snapping at him, but tragic figured though he had become, he scarcely heeded them. Against such fearful evidence, it was not their belief in him that he needed, it was his own. He felt his ego slipping from him. Don't desert me, bully, he whispered hoarsely to it. In his dark nature there was a touch of the feminine, as in all the great pirates, and it sometimes gave him intuitions. Suddenly he tried the guessing game. Probably Johnny Depp read this, I am sure he read this. And then he turned it into this iconic Captain Jack Sparrow with a touch of the feminine. It was actually interesting. Sometimes you read, he was just doing his thing, but Disney hired him. But of course, Disney is just a bunch of people pleasers. But they hired Johnny Depp to play Captain Jack Sparrow, and while I was still more invested into movies, I watched the making of. And he then described that when he started with the role, I mean, he was just in the role, right? He was in the moment. He was doing his Jack Sparrow thing, and they were like, "What is he doing?" You know. In the end, they could just follow him. I mean, they just had to. I mean, it's probably hard to understand what he's trying to express, because he's like, you know, but he's got a great mind. He's probably a bit dirty, but that just comes from, you know. But you don't know how he is in private life, right? So you can't really judge it. But what he did there was clearly a way of just expressing what he had on the inside, you know. And you cannot restrain that. You cannot go to an actor that has kind of a free mind or a creative mind like this and then say, well, you have to do it more like this. It's like, okay, I can say the lines you give me, but the way I interpret them and the way I do it, you know, it's my own. That's what I like, kind of. One of my favorite Ghibli movies is Only Yesterday. It's really Only Yesterday. It's a story of remembrance, but also of, you know, intuition, and that's how life can happen. I'm sometimes sorry for myself that my life is so secluded, but at the same time it couldn't be any other way because I'm simply too emotionally involved. And once people realize it, they try to make use of it, and so I have to simply do my own thing a lot. But if I watch, let's say, I have watched it, I don't have to watch it again, I can go back to it in my mind. But when I watched Only Yesterday, you know, that's actually what I want, right? But it just seems so far away, you know. This should be normal, people living, right? But then you see all the hard work these people put in, also collecting these flowers that they then use to color things. And then what happens to it? They sell it, it gets marketed, and then people that have zero appreciation for the hard work, you know, just use it to look more flashy. It's sad, because it makes hard work go to waste. Plus, yeah, there's always this kind of bitter note in everything that I see about modern day life. I don't know why I'm going out of myself again. I just couldn't stand the silence any longer. I just felt like I just need to continue with my quest to bring this to a final stage. Otherwise, I'll be stuck at this forever. And I don't want to do this forever. As nice as it is, I do this because I'm alone. And that is what I can tell you, you know, you should never forget. A lot of creators are alone a lot. So your goal is to... So I have local projects. That's what I was trying to tell you in... I needed to prioritize. I have local projects. I go hiking basically, yeah, once a week. And I share it and I say, hey, you know, it's in Germany, of course. Here, you can join me. You know, one already did. The next hike is on Saturday. And then the next Saturday is another hike. And they are 30 to 40 kilometer hikes. The next in June will be a 2-day hike. So that's the only thing that keeps me from going completely insane. The time I have in nature, because this here is really intense. You know, I maintain this space. It's full of my mind. It's crazy. I mean, I've written at the walls, you know, stuff that you know, freedom of mind, cloudy weather ahead. That's a video I created, but it's only on Odyssey because it's too rebellious. No direction question tag, deep flow, master plan. You gotta have a plan for your life and then live it. And that makes it interesting. Yeah, it's dragging itself out. I'm sorry, almost. But maybe it's just my way of also getting used to standing in front of the microphone again. Captain, they were his dogs, snapping. It is lowering to our pride. Our pride. They were his dogs snapping at him, but tragic figure, I'm just going to read this to the end now. But tragic figure though he had become, he scarcely heeded them. Against such fearful evidence, it was not their belief in him that he needed, it was his own. He felt his ego slipping from him. "Don't desert me, bully," he whispered hoarsely to it. In his dark nature, there was a touch of the feminine, as in all the great pirates, and it sometimes gave him intuitions. Suddenly he tried the guessing game. "Hook," he called, "have you another voice?" Now Peter could never resist a game, and he answered blithely in his own voice, "I have." "And another name?" Aye. "Vegetable?" asked Hook. "No." "Mineral?" "No." "Animal?" "Yes." "Man?" "No." This answer rang out scornfully. "Boy?" "Yes." "Ordinary boy?" "No." "Wonderful boy?" To Winnie's pain, the answer that rang out this time was, "Yes." "Are you in England?" "No." "Are you here?" "Yes." Hook was completely puzzled. You ask him some questions, he said to the others, wiping his damp brow. Smee reflected. "I can't think of a thing," he said regretfully. Can't guess, growled Peter. "Do you give it up?" Of course, in his pride, he was carrying the game too far, and the miscreants saw their chance. Yes, they answered eagerly. "Well then," he cried, "I am Peter Pan." Pan! In a moment, Hook was himself again, and Smee and Starkey were his faithful henchmen. "Now we have him," Hook shouted. "Into the water, Smee, Starkey, mind the boat, take him dead or alive." He leaped as he spoke, and simultaneously came the gay voice of Peter. "Are you ready, boys?" See, now I've expended myself. I'm just saying. Aye, from various parts of the lagoon. The lamb? The lamb into the pirates. The fight was short and sharp. First to draw blood was John, who gallantly climbed into the boat and held Starkey. There was a fierce struggle in which the cutlass was torn from the pirate's grasp. He wriggled overboard and John leapt after him. The dinghy drifted away. Here and there a head bobbed up in the water. And there was a flash of steel followed by a cry or a whoop. In the confusion, some struck at their own side. The corkscrew of Smee got Toodles in the fourth rib, but he was himself pinked and turned by Curly. Farther from the rock, Starkey was pressing slightly and the twins hard. Where all this time was Peter? He was seeking, I don't know how audiobook creators do this, to be honest. I really don't know. He was seeking bigger game. The others were all brave boys, and they must not be blamed for backing from the pirate captain. His iron claw made a circle of dead water round him, from which they fled like affrighted fishes. But there was one who did not fear him. There was one prepared to enter that circle. Strangely, it was not in the water that they met. Hook rose to the rock to breathe, and at the same moment Peter scaled it on the opposite side. The rock was slippery as a ball, and they had to crawl rather than climb. Neither knew that the other was coming. Each feeling for a grip met the other's arm. In surprise, they raised their heads. Their faces were almost touching, so they met. Some of the greatest heroes have confessed that just before they fell to, they had a sinking. Had it been so with Peter at that moment, I would admit it. After all, this was the only man that the sea cook had feared. But Peter had no sinking. He had one feeling only, gladness, and he gnashed his pretty teeth with joy. Quick as thought, he snatched a knife from Hook's belt and was about to drive it home, when he saw that he was higher up the rock than his foe. It would not have been fighting fair. He gave the pirate a hand to help him up. It was then that Hook bit him. Not the pain of this, but its unfairness what dazed Peter. It made him quite helpless. He could only stare horrified. Every child is affected thus the first time he is treated unfairly. All he thinks he has a right to when he comes to you to be yours in fairness. What? All he thinks he has a right to when he comes to you to be yours is fairness. All he thinks he has a right to when he comes to you to be yours is fairness. See, there's no comma in this. After you have been, sometimes we overuse commas. It's just, after you have been unfair to him, he will love you again, but will never afterwards be quite the same boy. No one ever gets over the first unfairness, no one except Peter. He often met it, but he always forgot it. I suppose that was the real difference between him and all the rest. You see, I had to remember unfairnesses, which is why I also often feel so spent, or felt so spent, and why I spend a lot of time alone. Because I have been often used as an outlet for other people's, bad emotional state or something, which they also maintain in a way, right? They could have changed it, but they wanted to keep it their way. Possibly due to lack of courage, because I see no reason. I don't think nobody is too broken to change. I was broken so many points that I basically felt dead and no longer wanted to live, and so I started making content to share my mind. So you may understand why this to me is also a tough ride, because I do all these hikes and stuff, but I don't always feel super awesome. I do feel the strain, and I have also sometimes physical, like problems that I have to work on. I have to do a lot of acupressure because I'm channeling a lot of energy. That means there's also a lot of chaos going through you, which is why I have to assist myself with diet. And I have to breathe a lot. And that's why I stand, to be a channel, to be present, to practice this. But I cannot just stand around and do nothing. I also have a lot of work on my teeth, right? Which is why I stopped with using, salt. I just started eating without salt. It works. That's all I can say. It's just hard to get there. So you have to learn how to cook and also get used to food without salt. So I decided to remember everything that happened. And that's a part of growing up and taking responsibility for yourself, is seeing what happened to you in your life, and then also understand why. I don't in that sense care what you have gone through in your life, because I have gone through my own share of things. And if you've treated me unfairly in the past, I don't have to feel overly bad for having stood my ground a couple of times, calling you to your senses because you refuse to stop eating sugar, or to acknowledge simply, okay, I feel shit, I have to change, right? You can run away into cake and movies and coffee, but feeding your shadow won't really make this experience any more nice. Which is why you look at the shadow, you mix in the light, and then you go, that's what life is supposed to be like. And that's why everyone's so empty, because they're just all high on junk. You know, identifying with objects. There's no exchange. But I get it in a way, you know. But sometimes it's better to be injured, you know, so you can learn, than to be too afraid of confrontations. But yeah, sometimes I also give in to confrontations, which I feel other people want to have. I'm trying to not do this anymore because it's a waste of energy. Or so it seems, it's hard to say. It's just usually really painful when people that are clinging are trying to, you know, get you to stop with all the letting go. Because, you know, I can have a row with you, I remember it and I'll learn from it, but I won't, you know, I won't make it a point all the time. But I'm probably gonna adjust my behavior and see if I can avoid it. So if I do this, then I also have to take my time. That's the whole point, right? I just don't know if this is the right thing to do. But I have worked through insecurities before. The book is looming, you know. The book is looming over my head. So if I finish this book, I can do something else. So when he met it now, it was like the first time. And he could just stare helpless. Twice the iron hand clawed him. A few minutes afterwards, the other boys saw a hook in the water striking wildly for the ship. No elation on his pestilent face now, only white fear, for the crocodile was in dogged pursuit of him. On ordinary occasions the boy would have swum alongside cheering, but now they were uneasy, for they had lost both Peter and Wendy and were scouring the lagoon for them, calling them by name. They found the dinghy and went home in it, shouting, "Peter, Wendy," as they went, but no answer came, save mocking laughter from the mermaids. They must be swimming back or flying, the boys concluded. They were not very anxious. They had such faith in Peter. They chuckled, boy-like, because they would be late for bed, and it was all Mother Wendy's fault. When their voices died away, there came cold silence over the lagoon, and then a feeble cry. "Help! Help!" Two small figures were beating against the rock. The girl had fainted and lay on the boy's arm. With a last effort, Peter pulled her up the rock and then lay down beside her. Even as he also fainted, he saw that the water was rising. He knew that they would soon be drowned, but he could do no more. As they lay side by side, a mermaid caught Wendy by the feet and began pulling her softly into the water. Peter, feeling her slip from him, woke with a start and was just in time to draw her back, but he had to tell her the truth. "We are on the rock, Wendy," he said, "but it is growing smaller. Soon the water will be over it." She did not understand even now. "We must go," she said, almost brightly. "Yes," he answered faintly. "Shall we swim or fly, Peter?" He had to tell her. "Do you think you could swim or fly as far as the island, Wendy, without my help?" Now, how can they swim? Okay, maybe if he's there. She had to admit that she was too tired. He moaned. "What is it?" she asked, anxious about him at once. "I can't help you, Wendy. Hook wounded me. I can neither fly nor swim." "Do you mean we shall both be drowned? Look how the water is rising." They put their hands over their eyes to shut out the sight. They thought they would soon be no more. As they said thus, something brushed against Peter, as light as a kiss, and stayed there, as if saying timidly, "Can I be of any use?" It was the tail of a kite, which Michael had made some days before. It had torn itself out of his hand and floated away. Michael's kite, Peter said without interest, but next moment he had seized the tail and was pulling the kite toward him. It lifted Michael off the ground, he cried. Oh, it lifted Michael off the ground, he cried. Why should it not carry you? Both of us. It can't lift two, Michael and Curly tried. Let us draw lots, Wendy said bravely. And you a lady, never. Already we had tied the tail around her. She clung to him. She refused to go without him. But with a goodbye, Wendy, he pushed her from the rock, and in a few minutes she was borne out of his sight. Peter was alone on the lagoon. The rock was very small now. Soon it would be submerged. Pale rays of light tiptoed across the waters, and by there was to be heard a sound at once the most musical and the most melancholy in the world. The mermaids calling to the moon. Yeah, he's better on his own if it's a situation like this, because she would then just drag him down. So letting go is important, but you can still think of the person, right? If you are really like lovers, then you have to have the other one always has to have a place in your life, right? But some people aren't like this. Some people are just selfish. They don't want to share. So you stay away from them, or give them as little as it requires to keep the relationship from dying, if that's what is needed. But if you are the one that has something to give, then you must learn to be patient and then to let others come to you. So you don't have to run after others. But sometimes people are manipulating this, whether knowingly or not. It's just maybe your presence makes them feel good. They want to have you around. Well, what if your presence is weighing me down and keeps me from progressing? Have you ever thought of that? Well, I don't care, because I'm drowning. Yeah, okay, but if you're drowning, then you gotta have to start swimming. And then they say, well, what do you mean swimming? Well, you have to swim, or else I will push you off on a kite. That's the situation. I cannot swim. Okay, well, I can't swim for both of you, for both of us, so I'm just gonna let you, and that's what it is. You have to tell people to do their own stuff. Hold your planks. And then people come, they want your help. You say, well, have you held your planks today already? Have you walked on all fours to the bathroom to practice, movement? I'm just saying. You gotta know about these things. To get people off your back, basically. Because they're not your children. No matter how much you grow, your parents may start feeling like children. But they're not your children. That would be condescending. They may act like children, but then it's just an escape. They have to be responsible about themselves, or they get milked in an old people nursing home. Nobody wants that. So sometimes you have to even push your parents a little and say, hey, wake up, Gotta keep pushing, collecting the trash. That's what this is. You are being creative. You don't know what's gonna happen in one session. This is a session for me. This brings up memories. This brings up uncomfortable stuff. I cannot hide this, but I can share it with you, to confront you with it, because you're clearly trying to run away from it. Well, maybe you're not, because you're listening to me. You could have listened to anyone else recording this, but you chose me. So that's what you wanted, right? You wanted to know. Now I've told you, gotta do your work. And then it doesn't matter what you do, emotions will show themselves. And whether they're yours, it doesn't matter, they are there. You look at them, you feel them, you try to let go of them in the best way that you can. And sometimes it needs to be said, even when you're alone, I have said things into the darkness when I sat in meditation also. I just said, there was like a conversation in my mind and just responded to it. I said, well, it's not my business. You can say whatever you want, whatever feels right at the moment. Just speak your mind. You don't have to record it. It's just what I do. But I can address people that loom around me with their shadows. And yoga is basically also the shadow dance. Peter was not quite like other boys, but he was afraid at last. A tremor ran through him, like a shudder passing over the sea. But on the sea, one shudder follows another till there are hundreds of them. And Peter, lots of shudders, and then you've got a tsunami. And that's an emotional shockwave. That's also the consequential backlash. You've been doing lots of little things, and they all pile up into a tsunami, and just like BAM! Cha-boom! You see, it's so strange. I've got energy, I've got no energy. I'm always between darkness and light. Woo-woo, up, down, and I try to navigate myself to stay in the middle. But I can't control this. It just happens, Left, right, up and down, left and right. Do this for me one more time, please. No, I've had enough, thank you. A tremor ran through him like a shudder passing over the sea. But on the sea one shudder follows another till there are hundreds of them, and Peter felt just the one. Next moment he was standing erect on the rock again, with that smile on his face and the drum beating within him. It was saying, to die will be an awfully big adventure. So you gotta prepare yourself. You see, that's the closure of this session. You gotta prepare yourself. You're gonna die. But you gotta make it a big adventure, because you're dying every second that you live. Parts of you are dying, and that's why you have to actively progress and let go. So be creative, move on. Why be creative? Because when you're creative, you know what you have done. If you just watch movies, it's just gonna be a movie. But you can crochet a hat, and you've got evidence. You have no evidence of having watched the movie, but you have an evidence of, I've crocheted a hat. I sat through, nights to finish crocheting a hat. Or weaving carpets, man. Start weaving carpets, and you work yourself up from there. You first start doing it. If this is the only thing you want to do, bam. I have a typewriter, but I don't know how to fix it. So I am stuck at, writing on my laptop. I would like to work with a typewriter, but I don't know how to fix it. So I'm waiting for someone to come into my life where I can say, hey, can you please fix this? Because I don't really know how to do this. I'm not in that, I can work with electronics, but there are certain limits where I just say, I can't do this. I probably have to ask someone a favor. Because I cannot do everything, which is why I am really interested in living in a commune. Because I realize I have a good mind, I can plan, I like looking ahead. I like planning, I like making plans. But also saying, my mind is like swallowing information like crazy. And it puts it all together, that's why I write books. But some people are really and truly carpenters. Or, they just like to work. They're just in the moment. They don't really plan. So you gotta be a fox, man. You gotta know winter is coming. Which is why I live without a radiator. I mean, it's here, but I just don't turn it on. Because I want to live smart. And for that, you have to have the cold. And for the light, you have to have the darkness. If I don't go through the darkness, then I will never come out into the light. And that's then the tunnel. And that's why I'm writing portals through life. It's one tunnel after another. And now this is the tunnel that leads me back to working on this book. You get this? I got it. You see? Okay, so To die will be an awfully big adventure. Next on is Chapter 9. But for now, I shall retreat.